Thank you. I just better say, in 1982, I was a founder member of ASAP, which is a complete mouthful. It's the Association for the Scientific Study of Anomalous Phenomena. And they were the other founder members, not me, were a breakaway from the Society for Psychical Research. They wanted to have this more up-to-date scientific approach. And within 2 years of that, I have to say, I realized that going to haunted places with magnetometers and cameras, which were always going to go wrong, as William said, and with tape recorders, which always went wrong, and magnets, trying to feel if there was any readings on these expensive machines, wasn't going to tell us any more about ghosts, and I don't think it's ever possible for us to know what they are. But we do know that the same places are haunted, and that certain places have a haunted feel. And that when we are maybe walking at night through these places or anywhere that seems a bit spooky, we may feel fear, which is going to alter our state of consciousness. The adrenaline is going to be up. And we may misidentify something because we think there's going to be, this is spooky, when actually it might not have been. Or we may have stumbled out of the pub and our vision isn't too good, and we're thinking that we're seeing haunted things. And even if we're not, you might be in a place that's been haunted and you think, oh my God, that scene. It gives you a change of consciousness, whether you've seen something or not. So I'm not concerned about the reality of ghosts in this talk. I'm concerned about how these experiences, especially the heightened states, when you're in these kind of places and have these experiences, conjures up amazing creativity. And I think there's more of this happening now with writers, with artists, and even musicians. It no longer matters if the ghost is real. And we're never going to know what it is anyway. Now, when we speak of ghosts, people generally mean, and I think everyone sort of generally thinks, that we're talking about spirits or shades of the dead. But when I was in ASAP, I came across many cases of ghosts of the living, which is really interesting, and also ghosts of animals. But one of the most fascinating things is the ghosts of fictional and folkloric characters. So with Ruth Beyer, who's with me today, she had a project called Haunted, and I was invited to the opening of the exhibition. I'd never seen any of the pictures before. Now that morning, I woke up, or I thought I had, from a dream, and I was woken up by my husband, who was shaking me because you're having a nightmare, you're screaming. And what happened is, in the dream, I thought I was awake. He'd come into the room, but with a pig's head. And I knew that it was actually something quite disturbing, obviously. And then we walked into the exhibition that evening, and there was Ruth's photograph of the pig-headed ghost, which I had never heard of before in my life. And I think William touched on synchronicity briefly. I think synchronicity has a lot to do with paranormal experiences and hauntings. And it's also a really weird way of getting information. So I became very interested in the pig-faced lady. And I'm just going to very, very quickly. So on the same day, I have 2 pig-faced encounters. She comes from European folklore and folktales of mainly Netherlands, but other places as well. And in the 17th century, sailors were bringing back these stories of the pig-faced lady. And they, in the bars of Dublin and London and Bristol, they lost their folkloric European-specific place-specific context. And so people started to actually believe that the pig-faced lady was going to get you, and to get you would be really, really bad. And Elliot O'Donnell, the ghost hunter and ghost writer, when he was writing about her, he was like, she is evil, she will take you into the void. I mean, it was really dramatic stuff. I'm going to very, very quickly, because I'm aware of the time passing. One such tale is Tamaki Skinker, and the tale is that an old beggar woman who is a witch curses a pregnant noble lady because she refuses to give her money. And the curse is that as the mother is hoggish, so swinish shall the child she goeth with be. And the woman gives birth to the pig-faced lady. And the beggar was tried and convicted for witchcraft because she was unwilling to reverse the curse, and she was sent to the stake. But this is a folk story. It didn't really happen. But now, because of the fear and the expectation, and everybody's heard, in 17th to 19th centuries, this pig-faced woman is walking around very well-heeled areas like Marylebone and Chelsea in London, but to see her is going to be absolutely awful for you. And so it's as if the fear itself had projected this completely fictional and folkloric character into these locations. And I personally find when working with art or with writing or meditations magically, drawing these characters to me, who are not going to hurt me, finding out their story, can actually give you access to open quite a lot of doors to things you hadn't considered. Now, I'll just move on quickly. If people think that Tamaki Skinker, as a folklore creature, has been projected by frightened people onto the areas, and then people actually now do see her because she's there now. They've put the big, projection out there, perhaps wrapped with fear, which will hold on to a place perhaps. Everybody knows who this is, I imagine. Sherlock Holmes, when he first appeared in the Strand magazine, when he first appeared in Conan Doyle's books, no deerstalker hat is mentioned, and his pipe is an ordinary pipe, not the elaborate calabash pipe, and he didn't have the caped cloak. But then Paget, the artist, started doing the drawings for the Strand magazine's illustrated stories, and he created this vision of the deerstalker hat and the calabash pipe. And the image we all know today, just from the silhouette, we know that's Sherlock Holmes. Does everybody? I mean, I'm taking it for granted because I assume he's an international figure now, not just a British figure. And we only have to see that silhouette, we know who it is. So, of course, now there are credible accounts, and too many accounts, of people seeing the ghost of Sherlock Holmes. A lot of people don't know that he's a fictional character. They think he's a real historic detective. And he's become such an image, even more so than the pig-faced lady. He's in our consciousness. And Gillette acted him on the stage in 1916, and he chose to use the imagery of Paget. And then in 1939, with film of Sherlock Holmes, and Basil Rathbone sends this image into mass consciousness. It's now become an international phenomenon, as I said. And I feel that it's no coincidence that people are actually seeing Sherlock Holmes haunting Baker Street, where he fictionally lives, and they've even got a blue plaque for this fictional character. So, if a personal experience of this, if you don't mind me telling, just to show that I'm not completely believing stuff and being completely subjective, or maybe I am, was within a very close family to ours. I haven't got time to go into details, but Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, became completely tangled up with real dramatic poltergeist activity in their home. And one of the daughters, who was only a toddler when all this was happening, like 2 years old, without knowing that this had happened, but I was very aware that it had happened, I was much older, she went on to be obsessed with Jane Eyre and did her degree based on Jane Eyre. So I think that moving on from whether ghosts are real, looking at ghosts of fictional characters, I don't know, it's just really enriching in the way that you can take those characters into the arts, into photography, into painting, into music. And they kind of tell you a lot as well. But the pig-faced lady was not a bad character, whatever Aristotle said, and however frightened the sailors were. She was actually a tragic character, and her story is very, very interesting. But it's pure fiction. But today, we'll see her ghost. So I'm just going to hand you over to Ruth now.
So I always have been interested in ghosts, and I had some ghostly experience, but I'm also not here to prove there are ghosts. I was living at one point in a housing association, and 5 people had the same kind of ghostly experience with the same sound, the same shape, and so on. And I also had a ghostly cat not that long ago in my room. But what fascinated me and why I started, I'm a photographer, so what fascinated me was London is a very haunted city. It's just brilliantly haunted. And what fascinated me that there were so many locations where they recorded sighting of ghosts by people from completely different backgrounds. Maybe they were 2 years apart. But they did see the same sight or heard the same noise. And the idea was that I would go to this location, photograph the location, and then superimpose what was happening in my mind, what it might have looked like. So it was an art project, really. Obviously, I know that I can't photograph ghosts. But the first location I went to see it's a place called Blackheath in London. It's a beautiful area. And this poor woman, she was a Victorian woman, and her sighting has been recorded quite a few times. So her ghost has been seen a lot around the tree and around sort of the street. It's called Billett Street. And the story is that she always used to meet her lover around the tree, and he didn't turn up, and he never turned up again. And she supposedly, some stories are saying she hung herself on the tree, but she killed herself apparently around the area. And she has been sighted a lot of times. And when I went there, you couldn't make it up. It was a really beautiful, very crisp winter day. The sky was blue, but it was really crispy, like the floor felt really icy. And there were all these crows, shrieking away. And it had a really eerie, haunted kind of feeling. You just couldn't get away from it. But I also wonder, because Blackheath is actually quite a sort of area where they had a plague pit under the ground, and they also found a cave which they used in the Second World War. So it had a kind of melancholy feeling around it, very beautiful, but it definitely had a haunted feeling around it. The next ghost I would like to introduce is an actor called William Terrace. So he was an actor, he was very popular, and he was a Shakespearean actor as well, and he even toured the USA. In 1880, he joined the Henry Irving Company, which was managed by Bram Stoker, who written Dracula. And the company was seen as a very bohemian group because they also were members of the Golden Dawn, were also part of this company. And Terrace himself also was really good friends with George Bernard Shaw. Now, in 1880s, Terrace worked in the Adelphi Theatre, which is a lovely little theatre around Covent Garden. And he, as usual, went through the entrance, and then he was accosted by Richard Archer Prince and killed, violently stabbed to death. Now, Richard Archer was also an actor, but I think, he was known as being drunk all the time and not being very reliable. And actually, William Terrace helped him out and made sure that he always got some funding. But there was an argument between those two men, and the funding stopped for Archer. And he decided it's all William Terrace's fault, and he was so enraged that he stabbed him to death. And ever since then, there have been many recordings of having seen, apparently, the actor William Terrace, and he's especially seen in the Covent Garden underground, it's like the metro, in the spiral staircase. And I have used the spiral staircase many times because Covent Garden is very touristy nowadays, and till you get a lift and so on. And it's a never-ending spiral staircase. And I'm not saying this is the ghost, but you do hear strange noises and clunking. You can hear footsteps, and it's very tight as well, and it just goes on. So I can imagine William, haunting the underground, Corbin Underground. And then what I would like to talk next, it's not only people, who sometimes are the haunted, recorded site. It can be also animals. And I came across this fantastic story, which there have been 5 sightings, apparently. It's in Highgate, and Highgate, again, is a very haunted area in London. The Highgate Cemetery is very famous. We come to that later. Dick Turpin used to hang out there, and he's also been seen, apparently. But I like to talk about Sir Francis Bacon, who was a scientist and philosopher, so not the painter, but the scientist. And he was born in 1561 in London. And he was a kind of child prodigy. He sort of entered Cambridge with the age of 12. And he was knighted in 1603, and he was also a member of the Freemasons and Rosicrucians. And he was seen as a very kindly man because at that time he really opposed torture. So he was seen as a forward-thinking person. Now, he was riding the carriage with the king's physician. It was King James I at the time. And Francis Bacon was discussing the idea of freezing meat in order to preserve it, because he wanted to prove that if you put meat into snow, or if you freeze it, it will not go rotten. And the story goes, he stopped at a house on Pond Square, which is also part of Highgate. He stopped in the front of a house of an old lady who had chickens, and he bought the chicken and asked her to remove the organs. And there was snow on the ground, and he sort of put snow in the chicken to prove to the physician that the meat is not going to rot. He was staying around Pond Square, and that's the story, that he died 3 days later from pneumonia. So it's likely that he might have caught a chill. Now, he is not haunting the area, but what has been seen 5 times is the chicken. I don't know if you can see that. And the last, is this still okay, my thing? Sorry, it's slippy. Okay. The last time it has been seen, this chicken, was in 1975 by a pizza delivery boy who was driving his moped with a pizza. It was in the evening. He was confronted with a giant plucked chicken, walking towards him and giving out a big squawk. That's the story. He crashed into a tree, apparently. But that has been the last time he's been seen. But all over London, there's also sightings of bears and dogs and cats and so on. But I thought the frozen, the chicken, the plucked chicken, was just too amazing, So, and I don't know, have I still got time? Just a second. Yes, 2 minutes. I can do it. And the last ghost I would like to introduce is actually rather sad. It is also in Highgate. It's Highgate Cemetery. And Highgate Cemetery is an incredible, beautiful Victorian graveyard. It consists of 2 parts. It's just beautiful. And there are many, many famous people are buried around that area. And for instance, Marx is buried there. It has a beautiful sculpture of Marx as well. And then Elizabeth Siddal, the famous Pre-Raphaelite model, and Catherine Dickens, and George Eliot, and George Michael, not that long ago, and Malcolm McLaren, and even Caroline's parents are buried there. But this poor woman the ghost of this poor woman has been seen frantically running up and down the cemetery. And the story is that she was looking for the grave of her children. She can't find the grave of her children. There have been quite a few records of her sighting. When I photographed at that time in that area, it was a really beautiful sunny day, and but the sun was sort of flickering through the trees, and there was a slight draft. Again, you couldn't make it up. The sort of leaves were flying around, and it again had this kind of feeling of haunted, eerie, and melancholy. And as I said before, Highgate is riddled with ghosts. You know, it has a grey face peeking through the gates, which has been seen many times. And I have to be honest, I wouldn't like to be locked in on my own during the night. Thank you very much.
Ghostly quiet.
First question for Ruth. I wonder if you could speak a bit more about how you work technically with the superimposition of photography, because you didn't mention that.
Or let you see. Did you say you can see it? I can't tell you, son. If you can't see it, then you just never know.